Hi, and welcome back to Koheles. So, Koheles is continuing along his journey toward despair. I'm smiling because I enjoy studying Koheles, but Koheles is not smiling. Koheles had been attempting to achieve ultimate satisfaction through various avenues and various means, and none of those had come to fruition. All of them had been unsuccessful, and Koheles had begun to despair. And Koheles continues, chapter 2, verse 22. Ki mahova la'adam b'chal amalo v'rayon libo shehu amel tachas hashamesh. For what is there present to man in all of his efforts and in the striving of his heart that he should exert himself under the sun? Effort and toil by its nature is future-oriented, is goal-oriented. We do work now in order to achieve something in the future. And the future achievement is what gives purpose and meaning to what we do now. But paradoxically, by sacrificing the present to put an effort toward the future, we're forced to lose the present. However, if the future achievement makes the present worth it, then all of our toil in the present springs into being and becomes worth it. But remember last week, Koheles had been discussing how he would ultimately be forced possibly to lose control over the product of his effort. Suppose it were possible to guarantee that all of the product of his effort would continue to be used wisely after he's gone and would be used only toward positive achievement, would not be used foolishly, then perhaps the product of his efforts would be worth it. But there is no way to guarantee that, as Koheles had discussed last week. It's quite possible that Koheles would lose all of the product of his effort and somebody foolish would get them through no efforts of that person's own and waste all of that work and throw it away and use it completely contrary to what Koheles would have done. And therefore, because the future of that work is lost, the present effort and toil becomes negative. And Koheles realizes that there's no way to give true meaning and purpose and positivity to the present. And that's why he's despairing over his present efforts. And he's realizing that there's no way for them to really be guaranteed to be positive. And so those realizations are causing him despair because they're bringing into manifestation the negativity and the difficulty in all of his present toil and effort and work. Uverayon libo has several translations, like almost everything else in Koheles, and they all work together, of course. It can be the thoughts of his heart, it can be the striving of his heart, and it can also mean the breaking or the brokenness of his heart. Because the efforts and the toil that we exert in this world and the Koheles exerts are not only physical, of course they're physical too, it's all of the work that we do, but it's also mental and emotional and internal to ourselves. There's an internal struggle, there's work, there's effort that we do internally to think through what we're doing, to attempt to understand the best way to do things, to go back and forth and make decisions, to work through various things that we're thinking about in our mind. All of that struggle is internal just as much as it's external. In fact, it's possible to argue that it's internal more than external, that it's the internal difficulty and struggle that we feel, which is what causes the external pain as well. It's certainly as internal as much as it's external. And here the verse is discussing both of those sides, the external as well as the internal. And so all of those thoughts and realizations and despair are causing Koheles to feel the pain and the difficulty and the struggle in everything that he does and toils and exerts himself every day. And he's questioning the value of that present and current exertion. And Koheles continues, Ki chal yamav machovim v'chasen yano, gam balayla lo shachav libo, gam zeh hevel hu. For his days are all pains, and malaise his engagement. Also by night he rests not his heart. This too, it is hevel, absurdity. Now that he's thinking and noticing how his efforts are not worth it, they become malaise, frustration, and pain. Because of his realizations about the future, his current efforts are all difficult. And he's frustrated and despairing over those efforts. So not only is he toiling externally, and not only is he toiling and thinking internally, but his internal difficulties don't let him rest even when he wants to rest from those thoughts. He can't sleep at night because his thoughts and his mind are keeping him up. Gamba laila lo shachav libo. There's a double meaning here. There are two things that aren't resting. It's his heart that's not resting, and his heart's not resting is causing him to be unable to rest and unable to sleep too. Gam balayla lo shachav libo. Also by night he rests not, his heart. His heart doesn't rest, and he doesn't rest either. A nice double meaning and double play on words. The two sentences are also a mirror of each other poetically, right? Because the first sentence is talking about his external toil and difficulty, and then his internal thoughts and struggles and difficulty. And here in this sentence too, Kol yamav machovim, all his days are pains. That's all his external pain and labor and struggle and difficulty. Also by night he rests not, his heart. His internal struggles don't allow him to rest either. And that's it for this week. Join us again next week to continue along through Koheles' journey through life and his attempts to find meaning. And we'll see how he attempts to resolve some of these difficulties. Perhaps he can, perhaps he can't. We'll follow along in his further journeys next week.